Media academic John Ellis proposed the periodization of television history into the three distinct eras: scarcity, availability, and plenty. Television has always been expanding my imagination, and now as an adult, I'm positive that it has greatly influenced my identity and the way I'm reasoning. That is why I'm currently doing my MA in International Television Industry at Royal Holloway under Chevening Scholarship. Mindful of television's role in creating not only individual but also national identity, with perspective of coming from an ethnically mixed background from Bosnia and Herzegovina, where ethnic presentation on television is hotly debated, I want to find out how other peripheral television industries are communicating with their audience and what their own subsequent perception of ethnic minority groups is. I also want to learn, did those television industries manage to retain being relevant amid growing foreign influence, primarily through the internet television, and what can we predict about their future? I met my first interviewee admiring the Roman ruins at the Windsor Great Park shipped from Northern Africa 2 centuries ago. Innocent is an NGO professional currently studying MSc in Election, Campaigns and Democracy at Royal Holloway and is closely observing political situation in his home country while in the UK. What I learned from him is that his home country of Zimbabwe, when it comes to domestic television industry, is still in a scarcity era.
I live in a country where you have polarized media, where you find that there is only one single television station. I find it quite fascinating as a political, student, because I watch it without fail, 8 o'clock news, and mostly out of wanting to find out what the regime is thinking. The government was forcing people to watch ZTV, to say, watch this is yours, propaganda is from the West and so on and so on. But people will quietly go and buy satellite TV and put it on their houses.
Vanessa, as she says, is a proud Colombian-born, currently studying at Royal Holloway an MSc in practicing sustainable development. Due to economic difficulties, she moved to the United States after finishing high school when she was 17 with her family. Vanessa explained how Colombian television industry is still important in creating Colombian identity.
I feel like we still consume national television, but we're still very consuming like television from United States, right? So, and from Turkey as well. Now we watch telenovelas, Turkish telenovelas. I think now newest generations, they might be consuming something more like foreign, but maybe like my generation and other generations, they still consume like more Colombian TV. But still, TV is like a main subject and a main object and idea in itself for Colombian and Colombian identity. Yeah, I mean, it is important, and I feel like when you look at the history of television, you can also, or like at least in Colombia, you can see like the changes or how it reflects the changes in society. Like who's depicted, how are they being depicted by TV, which population usually shows in TV and which ones are hidden. I think now it has been a change, but I feel like it can create the idea that there's people that don't exist in our country because we don't see them in TV.
Shara Zambrano, who I met in Royal Holloway's new library, where she studies MA in documentary by practice, is internationally awarded documentary producer and news correspondent from the Philippines. For her latest documentary, Shara won a Gold World Medal at the New York Festivals 2018 for covering news from the war zone during the Battle of Marawi. As a TV insider, Shara explained the television industry in her country.
Domestic TV, which means like Philippine-made TV, essentially still caters to the demands of most of the audience, which is socio-economic classes, simple stories, digestible stories for people who have... the rule for us is to write a story in a way that will make someone who's been to work the whole day still listen. Yeah, there is a government channel, but unfortunately, because it lacks the funding, it lacks the quality, therefore it lacks the credibility. So hardly anyone tunes in to state television.
All three interviewees' countries, like mine, are composed of different ethnic groups. So I asked them, are all ethnicities fairly represented on their national television?
So it's not really reflective of the people, because it's a template that is more of projecting a particular narrative.
Because of our history of colonization, the type of things that we consume are always gonna, or more likely, are gonna be European and from light-skinned people with like a certain background, a certain way of communicating, which I can't represent. Like, it's hard sometimes when the way I am is very different, so then I can't really communicate with people like that. So when you start consuming this kind of stuff, then maybe you wanna be like them. There's a lot of lack of representation about indigenous. I feel if ever, sometimes they will depict the indigenous because they wanted to do like this witchcraft, or like they wanted to do like this healing process or whatever. So like they're totally out of the picture. Actually, like looking at the representation as far as like who's in power, who's the owner of a company, within maybe telenovelas, usually it's men, and usually it's white men or mestizo men. So still you see like campesino. If he's a campesino, maybe he can really own a lot of stuff within the environment, like on an urban environment.
The Philippines, in terms of ethnic representation on television, it's got a lot of room for improvement. It's mostly dominated by the content, subject matter, the people who run it. They're essentially run by city people with city mindsets, city points of view, and city concern. The Philippines has always grappled with its identity because it was a Spanish colony for 300 years, and then it was occupied by Japan, and then it was occupied by the United States. And then all of these colonizers naturally tried to erase, the pre-colonial history of the Philippines from the people's minds. Even in soap operas, indigenous peoples are represented as kind of still that cavemen in exotic costumes, grunting, or sometimes they give them superpowers. Muslims are not represented well. The Muslim characters in entertainment are still perceived, they're just giving the bad guy roles and stuff like that without really much discussion as to, the nuances behind all of this.
Media imagery flows across borders far more fluidly than ever before. Television text is transcending boundaries and distorting traditional structures of domination. Traditional television has been heavily disrupted by the web and its digital film distribution. Recent Ofcom's report revealed that streaming services have overtaken pay TV in the UK. So how are the streaming giants perceived across the globe, and what can we predict about the future of traditional television?
I feel like I consume a lot of YouTube. Like, I love watching documentaries or interviews to scholars that I follow. So that's one of my biggest things at Netflix. Even like yesterday, watching the presidential elections, because I was like, oh, where can I watch this live? Because here I don't have cable, so I didn't have access to any Colombian television. But there's actually Caracol TV, which is one of like the mainstream channels in Colombia. They have their own YouTube channel, and they were streaming the elections. Or even though you don't live in the country, having that possibility to watch live television in these specific cases that are really important for us, or maybe even the football.
I watch Netflix here, in the UK. I also have just recently subscribed to ITV for the World Cup. Netflix is, getting into these market spaces, so what now needs to happen is that local producers, if they want to be competitive, they have to get their material on Netflix, which is also quite something else, or move for crumbs I was speaking about television, the digital satellite television. So South African multi-choice, the one that I watch, the 300 plus channels, which syndicates those things. It is also threatened because it is a South African company, but with a footprint across the continent. But now, it is also threatened by Netflix because initially their products were finding themselves across the continent. Now Netflix is coming in, and then Netflix price is about $11, right? $11 US, and the subscription for multi-choice products was exponentially high. It was expensive. So now they are forced to reduce their prices, which can actually, in a way, if you are thinking from a consumer point of view, it's good.
South Korea, from Europe, and everyone that has their own story to tell, and then it makes them go back and think like, what are our stories? Why is nobody telling them?
I also think that at the same time, if we don't have a structure in place that is actually supporting other communities to make sure that they're creating their own content, then it's going to be the same, and then people are just going to start consuming TV shows from the United States, which is what's happening a lot.
So you have producers and also people that then determine what kind of content is content. Other content, if you play your traditional, your tribal dance, they'll say it's not content. Content is what gets on Netflix.
People believe that television is going to die. I don't think so, because there are ways for the television industry to adapt to the changes. And people still watch the newscast. There's still some, some reassurance to having, the same thing on at the same time, and having it's a habitual thing, I guess. I don't know if the old, if the TV viewers get older and the younger generation comes in, that's when the shift is going to happen. And I don't know what shift that's going to be. But in the next few years, I don't see it dying at all.